finishing 5.5. And like I said, these problems all have a number in front of the x squared. So if you look at questions 1 through 4, you see that number. So the process for getting our x-intercepts is completely different. There's a lot of extra steps that you didn't see, which is going to make it seem a lot harder. So it's very, very important that you focus, and when I want you to try something, I want you to try it instead of just waiting until I write the answer up there, even if that means you have to erase something. So there's a lot of steps involved, and I've wrote these steps out, but we're going to work through them one at a time. So the first thing is to make sure that it's set equal to 0, as it should always be. And then factor out a GCF, if there is a GCF. That means there's like a number or something in common with all three terms. Many times you will think it's one of these more difficult problems, but once you factor out a GCF, then it could become one like the front page. So you could be saving yourself a lot of work if you look for a GCF. So let's look at number 1. It is set equal to 0. Is there anything that I can divide 5, 3, and 2 by? Is there anything that they're all 3 divisible by? No. So I don't have a GCF. So step 2, we are going to create a box, a 2 by 2 box. Now, you're going to need quite a bit of room, so don't be writing super big. You need to be able to write in each, I'll show you. So we're going to be writing a 2 by 2 like this. You need enough room to write in each individual square. Now, this first term goes in this first box. So it says place your ax squared, that's the first term, in the top left corner. And then your c, which is your last term, in the bottom right. So it goes down there. So your first and last term go in these corners. Then we have to figure out what goes in these other 2 boxes. And we're going to be looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be something and add to be something. But what they multiply to be is not -2. It's 5 times -2, which is -10. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be -10 and add to be -3. So what numbers we want to multiply are our A and C multiplied together. So 2 numbers that multiply to be -10 and add to be -3. So we're going to kind of go through that same process of figuring out what multiplies to be 10. So what can I write in my T table? What multiplies to be 10? 1. Let's just put 1 and 10. We'll figure out the negatives in a little bit. 1 and 10, 2 and 5. That's it. Because this is a -10, one of my 2 numbers has to be negative. and we have to add to be negative 3. You may need to use your calculator. Some of you just, hold on. Let's just pretend that you don't know. So if I try negative 1 plus 10, no. 1 plus negative 10, no. Negative 2 plus 5, oh, that's positive 3. I need negative 3, so 2 plus negative 5. There it is. So a positive 2 and a negative 5. Those numbers go in these boxes. It doesn't matter which one you put where. So 2, and you put an x with it. 2x, negative 5x. So we don't put x plus 2, x minus 5 in parentheses. We have this box all because of this one little number. This one extra number in the very front threw everything off. And I doubt you saw this in Algebra 1. Some classes get to it and some don't. You may have heard, if you did get to it, they may have taught slide and divide. There's a lot of different methods that you could go about factoring these. I'm showing you this one because, one, it's the one I prefer, and I know it's the one that Mr. Adams uses if you are in like Algebra 3 next year. You might see it again. So what we're going to do from here on is we are going to be finding the GCF of each column and each row. And those numbers become the factors, become what goes in our parentheses. So, for example, let's look at this column only. I'm going to cover the rest of that up. What can I divide both 5 and negative 5 by? What do they have in common? 5 and negative 5. What are they both divisible by? Can I divide them both by 2? No. Can I divide them by 3? What can I divide them by? 5. The GCF of 5 and negative 5 is 5. What about the x's? How many x's do they have in common? In common. This first one has x squared, which means it has 2 x's. The one down there just has 1 x. So the GCF would just be x. You can take out 1 x from both of them. I cannot take any more than 1 x from this one. Let's look at this column. What is the GCF? What do the 2x and negative 2 have in common? They can both be divided by 2. Do each of them have an x? No, so we can't write an x up there. Now let's look at this row. 5 and 2. Can I divide both of them by something? No. Just 1, but you don't need to write the 1. Do they each have an x in common? Yeah, they have an x. This one only has 1 x, so I couldn't take out any more x's than that. Right. What about negative 5x and negative 2? There's really nothing, and they don't have an x, so I have to write something there. So technically, I could divide them by 1. Now, here's the thing. If the first box has a negative, you have to make that a negative. You always go by the first box. So we're going to put a negative 1 there. These are our factors. 5x plus 2, x minus 1. So these are your factors that we are going to set equal to 0. 5x plus 2 equals 0. How do I solve this equation? So subtract 2 first, and we get 5x equals negative 2. And then divide by 5. Very good. So x equals negative, just leave it as a fraction, negative 2/5. And then we have x minus 1 equals 0. And how do I solve that one? Add 1. Good. So x equals 1. So it's a lot of work, I know that. We'll keep working through each example slowly, and then hopefully you'll start to catch on, and we'll continue to do more practice. But as you're working on these, try to read these steps and go through those steps one at a time. Let's look at number 2. Step 1, make sure it's set equal to 0. Check. Step 2, look for a GCF. Is there anything that I can divide all 3 of those by? No. They all have a 3 in them, but you can't divide 13 by 3, so it's not that. All right, step 2, let's make our 2 by 2 box. Okay, good job. All right, this 3x squared goes top left. Negative 30 goes bottom right. And we have to figure out what goes down here. We're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be what? Not negative 30. Not negative 13. Multiply to be, we do 3 times negative 30, which is negative 90. We're looking for 2 numbers that multiply. Look, down here we got negative 10. I multiplied these 2 numbers. We multiplied these 2 numbers. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 90 and add to be negative 13. Multiply to be negative 90, add to be negative 13. All right, so we got 1 and 90. Oh, we're going to go in order. 90 divided by 2. 2 and 45. You can go ahead and put it down. Yep, just keep going. So 90 divided by 3. 3 and 30. Go through all of your numbers. 90, because if you don't, you'll miss one. 4 does not go evenly. 90 divided by 5. 90 divided by 6. We have 6 and 15. and then 9 and 10. So those are all of the ways we can multiply to be 90. Because that is a negative 90, one of those numbers has to be negative, and they have to add to be negative 13. So don't yell anything out. I want you to see if you can look at these and figure out which it is. I'm going to give you just a minute. Does anybody know? Do what? So it is the 5 and 18. Which one is negative? The 18 is negative. Good. If I do, and we want to check, 5 times negative 18, I get negative 90. 5 plus negative 18, I get negative 13. Sometimes it's completely trial and error. You have to mess around with these numbers if you're not able to get it quickly. All right, so we have 5. We put 5x and negative 18x. Those numbers go in these last two squares, and they get an x with them. Now we need to find the GCF of each column and each row. What do 3 and 18 have in common? Or what can I divide both 3 and 18 by? 3. We can divide them by 3. Now this first box, is positive. So that means what I write out here needs to be positive. And then they both have an x. What about 5 and negative 30? What can I divide both of those by? We divide by 5, yeah. You can't do 5 divided by 6. You were thinking, oh, 30 divided by 5 is 6. So be careful. They're both divisible by 5. This one doesn't have an x, so I can't write an x out there. All right, 3 and 5. Is there anything I can divide both of those by? No. You can put a 1 there because we divide by 1. But they do both have an x. Okay. And then what about negative 18 and negative 30? What can I divide both of those by? What can you divide 18 and 30 by? Anybody know what the GCF is? It is 6. But because this is a negative 18, we have to make sure to write negative 6. Those become my factors. 3x plus 5 and x minus 6. Then we take each factor and set it equal to 0. So for this first one, we subtract 5 from both sides. And then what? Divide by 3. So x equals negative 5/3. Oh, it's kind of hard to see. And then the other one, all we have to do is add 6 to both sides, and we get x equals 6. If this was a question without these x squareds, or if you thought you did it the same way, you would be like, oh, negative 5 and 18. Neither of those are your x-intercepts. So that's why on the last questions, I didn't want you just to look at your table and tell me what they were. I wanted you to write the factors out. Let's go to number 3. Step 1, it's set equal to 0, and there's nothing that I could divide all 3 of those by. So we're going to go to step 2. And write out my Punnett square. In my Punnett square, the 6x squared, that goes top left corner, negative 4, bottom right corner. I want two numbers that multiply to be what? Multiply to be negative 24. You have to multiply these. 6 and negative 4. That's your A times your C. And that's in your steps 1 through 6. All right, and they add to be what? Positive 5. All right. So let's go over here. Negative 24. All right. You should be getting good at these tables. 1 and 24. 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. That's it. Now, looking at these numbers, we want them, well, first of all, one has to be negative because this is a negative 24. And we want them to add up to be positive 5. It is the 3 and 8. Which of those two numbers has to be negative? I'm hearing both. Well, let's try the 3. If we do negative 3 plus 8, we get positive 5. Oh, you can't see that on the screen. If we did 3 plus negative 8, we would have got negative 5. So the 3 has to be negative. Remember, it does not matter which one you put in each box. Your factors will still come out the same. All right. So, first column. What do 6 and 8 have in common? 2. And do they each have an x? Yes, they each have an x. What do negative 3 and negative 4 have in common? Nothing, so we need to put something there. So what do I put there? In this case, I need to put -1 because that first box had a negative. And what do 6 and -3 have in common? 3. And they both have an x. I do not need to make this one a negative because I only look at the first box, and it's positive. And what do 8 and -4 have in common? Well, they do have a 2 in common, but we want the greatest number. They also have a 4. If you don't put the greatest common factor, it won't be correct. So my factors are 3x plus 4 and 2x minus 1. What do I need to do with each factor? Set it equal to 0. Oops. Oh my goodness. 3x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4 from both sides. And then divide by 3. And then we have 2x minus 1 equals 0. We add 1 to both sides. Then I divide by 2. X equals 1/2. Any questions? All right, let's do number 4 together. All right, step 1. Is a set equal to 0? Yes. Is there a GCF? No. So start with the box. Top left box gets 2x squared. Bottom right box, -21. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be what? -42. And add to be -1. This middle number is -1. All right, we've got 1 and 42. 2 and 21. 3 and what? Oh, 3 and 7 is 21. We're getting to 42. So 3 and 14, yes. 4 does not go in there. 5 does not go. 6 and 7. There's your 7. And we want these to add up to be -1. it's going to be 6 and negative 7. You need to check. 6 times negative 7 is negative 42. 6 plus negative 7 is negative 1. So we have 6x, negative 7x. All right, 2x squared and negative 7x. What is the GCF? 1x. They both have an x. The first part of each factor is going to have an x, or whatever letter is in your problem. All right, what about 6x and negative 21? They are both divisible by 3. Good. What about 2x squared and 6x? 2x and negative 7 and negative 21. What can you divide them both by? What else? I've heard some people say it. They're both divisible by 7, but it needs to be negative 7 because that number is negative. All right. So my factors are 2x minus 7 and x plus 3. So I'm going to write 2x minus 7 equals 0. Add 7 to both sides. And then divide by 2. So you can write 7 over 2. If you type that in, it's going to be 3.5. A decimal is only okay if your decimal is like just a few decimal spots. If it goes on for a really long time, I do not want you to round. Only if you're going to write out the whole decimal. And then x plus 3 equals 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. Good. X equals negative 3.